Hello, I'm gonna present my work, Cognitively Verify Then Trust, the association of the cognitive process of news verification with media trust in responding to perceived mis and disinformation. My name is Joseph Yu, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of Wisconsin Green Bay. The spread of mis and disinformation is responsible for the decline in mainstream media trust, leading citizens to question the credibility of all information sources. Yeah, some mainstream media is covering fake information. This might be this might be the reason, and so as a result, public no longer trust mainstream media. And to avoid fake information, members of the public should verify the information to which they are exposed to. And the need for cognition can prompt verification behaviors because verification behaviors require considerable cognitive effort and skills. So traditionally, there is a maxim known as trust but verify. Individuals must trust the information sources first, but verify later using multiple sources to confirm the information that they received. However, due to the lack of trust in the mainstream media, uh, we can question this kind of maxim. So I would like to suggest verify then trust. So I assume the association of individuals' need for cognition with their perceived exposure to mis and disinformation, and the resulting association of this exposure with news verification behaviors. And also, I assume the strategy reflected in the new maxim verify then trust. So I'm gonna use the perceived exposure to dis and mis and disinformation (PEMD) as an umbrella term to this study. It's almost hard to understand the motivations of creating fake information without asking the creators. So, so the widespread of mis and disinformation can strengthen democratic values in our society by lowering quality of discussions and exacerbating political polarization. So these are defining terms and characteristics of mis and disinformation. And the second defining term is need for cognition. An individual's chronic disposition to engage in and enjoy effortful cognitive activity. Need for cognition is a highly effortful, logical, conscious, and comprehensive manner. I'm gonna also explain the top-down cognitive process in perceiving exposure to mis and disinformation as a conceptual framework to my study. Individuals' high-level cognition components such as belief, social influence, and motivations can initiate significant top-down cognitive processing of basic perceptions such as interpreting new information. And individuals with high NFCs tend to be curious and knowledgeable and have accurate memories. And then they may seek additional and relevant information. So, so thus, when individuals with high level of NFC confront mis and disinformation, they could easily perceive the discrepancy in their pre-existing knowledge. Thus, my first hypothesis is that the need for cognition is positively associated with perceived exposure to mis and disinformation. PEMD. So, news verification behaviors can be defined as engaging in safeguard behaviors to determine whether new data are reliable. And scholars have found that social perception may influence actual behaviors automatically, thereby potentially activating any pre-existing knowledge in the perceiver's memory, with which to shape a behavioral response. Thus, my second hypothesis is that PEMD is positively associated with news verification behaviors. And the perception that they've been exposed to mis and disinformation could lead high NFC individuals to verify the information that they encounter. Thus, I could assume that PEMD, perceived exposure to mis and disinformation, positively mediates the association between the NFC and engagement in news verification behaviors. So, media trust can be defined as the relationship between citizens as trusters and the news media organization as trustees. If members of the public believe that the information provided by the news media is inaccurate and misleading, they may distrust such sources. Also, 17% of conspiracy theories about COVID-19, a part of mis or disinformation, originated from the mainstream media. So, such kind of negative experience with mis and disinformation could diminish trust in the information sources that people consult, including news media outlets. So my first hypothesis is that PEMD is negatively associated with media trust. So trust but verify is a proverb suggested by Susan Massey, a US scholar, in terms of diplomats involved in arms negotiation, as a way to conceptualize the strategy of trusting provisionally the statement and promise made by the Soviet Union, but verifying every piece of information that Soviet officials provided in the context of nuclear arms talks. This kind of strategy have been used in multiple areas, such as international relations and even social media information verification behaviors. However, as the spread of mis and disinformation has eroded media trust, the importance of verifying information has become increasingly evident. So I'm gonna test my first RQ after testing all my hypotheses, which refers that it's the association between the NFC and media trust serially and positively mediated through PEMD and news verification behaviors. So, based on the nationally represented data, a total of 1,234 responses were collected. So, my first IV is need for cognition, and it's an independent variable. And the first mediator is perceived exposure to mis and disinformation. And the second mediator was news verification behaviors. And my DV is media trust. Yeah. And covariates include demographic variables such as age, gender, race, education, and income, and political ideologies. So I could conduct 3 OLS, ordinary least square regressions, to test H1, H2, and H4, and Hays process macro model. Look at this figure 1. And PEMD was a sole mediator, and I also conducted Hays process macro model 6 to conduct CDR mediations. PEMD and use verifications were mediators. So, as a result, the need for cognition was positively associated with PEMD. Look at this, table 1 by 0.18, and perceived exposure to mis and disinformation was positively associated with news verification behaviors. 0.38. Thus, H1 and H2 were significant for supported. And also, look at this figure, and the need for cognition was positively associated with news verification behaviors, and PEMD also mediates these associations. So I could find a partial mediations models because I could find both direct and indirect effects. Thus, H3 was supported. And perceived exposure to mis and disinformation was negatively associated with media trust, suggested by minus 0.12. Thus, hypothesis 4 was supported. And look at these serial mediation models. While the first indirect effects were negative, or the second and third indirect effects were all positive, and some of these three indirect effects of the serial mediations was significant. And given that confidence interval levels did not cross zero, so I could find also direct and indirect serial mediation effects. So yeah, I found the top-down cognitive processing explained by the association between the NFC and PEMD. So because high NFC individuals were by nature curious and tended to be knowledgeable and have an accurate memories, when they encounter mis and disinformation, they could perceive that it's somewhat irregular. That means that the perceived dissonance between pre-existing cognition and PEMD could promote news verification, the actual behaviors. And after the piece of information has been debunked, members of the public who encountered it in the mainstream sources may left with little trust in such sources. So the result of my serial mediation analysis combining top-down cognitive processing and the verified and trusted strategy confirmed that both high level of NFC and the perception of frequent exposure to mis and disinformation could lead to actual behaviors, beginning with news verification behaviors. High NFC individuals who perceive that they have been exposed to mis and disinformation and then additionally verify news reports from mainstream media outlets may come to trust such sources. Thus, there are two practical suggestions. Individuals should be careful at consuming information, and they should be conscious of backfire effect, known is a tendency of individuals to prefer misinformation that is consistent with their belief. Also, journalists should be careful at consulting recognized experts. They should cover the information accurately. And my study has some limitations. My study could not take the account of influence of affect and emotions in the top-down cognitive process, and my study could not include the intent to verify. Those components could lead to the much more complex models. My conclusion is that individuals' effort to engage in high-level cognitive processing and journalists' efforts to maintain their reputations as reliable sources of information will be highly effective in identifying mis and disinformation. And that's it. And if you have any questions, please send an email to me. Thank you.